I've already made one of the biggest mistakes that I could make, which is to invite a man whose voice will completely overshadow mine, and you'll be confused who's the host because he has the voice of a podcaster and I do not, which is why I bought this microphone to keep my voice a little bit less screechy than it normally is. We are joined by Mr. Michael Hawkins, the Director of Solutions Engineering and Product Marketing at BCM One. And I invited Michael on because we had worked together, and there's a significant amount of career success that I can attribute to his tutelage as well as the whole of the BCM One engineering department. I think he has a unique gift for being able to speak to technical aspects in a commonplace manner that can adapt to any audience member. And I think that's what makes solutions architects and engineers and salespeople or anybody in an educational role very successful. So I'm going to hand it over to Michael and allow him to give himself an introduction beyond what I have, as well as a little background on BCM One.
Thank you so much. I want you to introduce me everywhere I go going forward. I hope I can live up to that. Michael Hawkins, Director of Solutions Engineering, Product Marketing for BCM One. I've had an interesting career that's taken me down a lot of different paths within the customer side, within the agency side, working for large ISPs, and now I call BCM One home. Putting together all of those different experiences, understanding what the customer is going through, those are some of the things that we pride ourselves at BCM One, understanding what the customer is trying to do, designing interesting solutions around that. We only really have a couple core products, Dan. I mean, you know that. We're really good at voice and we're really good at data on a global scale. And that is something that not everyone can say with all the complexities within those international realms. Looking at BCM One and their strategy when I joined, they had a phenomenal data play. Had purchased a couple SIP companies, but it was on a domestic or national US level. The addition of Pure IP really completed the vision that they've been going for over the past 6 or 7 years, which is to provide a global voice and data platform for our customers.
Awesome. It's really cool to see the evolution of BCM One because I was super fond of working there. I think my departure was only due to circumstantial times. It was post-COVID. It was a little weird. I had some good success in the role that I was in, and I think that the next logical step just kind of there was a gap there that didn't make sense for me, which is the only reason why I left. I openly do miss it greatly. May sound like a bit of a plug, but if you understand who I am and you've had any conversation with me, I don't say anything I don't mean. And the people at BCM One are something that sticks out in my mind. I don't think there's any sort of leadership team that is accessible as the folks there. I had conversations with most of the C-suite, getting to know people. I mean, the employee council with Eileen. I sat 3 desks away from Jeff Bloss and had walked in, have conversations with him, the entire engineering department as well. And, Meghan and Andy are 2 of my favorite people, which I'm also very vocal about. I think that's testament to how you guys have evolved and the way you've handled acquisitions, which is not something that everybody does well. And the way you've pieced it together is extremely logical, which actually, not intended, brings me to my next question, which is to kind of transition into LinkLogix, because I know there's a story there. Give us a little background on that and how it transitioned into BCM One.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I do, I just want to say, couldn't agree with your comments about BCM more. We're slugging it out with some of the biggest companies that are out there. But one of my favorite things about being the underdog is that close-knit community, the ability to take in what we're hearing from our customers, iterate quickly, try new things. What doesn't work, we throw out. What does, we perfect. And that's amazing. But to answer your other question directly, so yeah, kind of an interesting path getting to BCM. I joined LinkLogix with the owner and proprietor, Craig Eigenbrode, one of my mentors, and has played a phenomenal role in my career development. I want to say probably 2016, so, a little over a decade ago, and or maybe 2014, so right out about a decade. And we were at an inception point. MPLS was falling down. People were replacing it with SD-WAN. There was no clear winner. And so what we had to do was create a strategy that helped solve our customers' problems with flexibility one of the challenges with that was finding someone who could do a lot of the basic blocking and tackling, the things that we take for granted, the monitoring, the notification, the restoration of underlying services. The SD-WAN piece was relatively easy. It's all programming bits and bytes, but when something would break that was part of that underlying technology, going back to the DNA of BCM, or that 30 years that made them who they are in the service industry, those carrier relationships and the ability to pinpoint what's wrong and effectively find the right person within those carriers to restore those services was crucial. Being an agent, we had the option to choose anyone. Now, I'm wearing the BCM One logo now, and the reason why was because they didn't have maybe the coolest portal in the entire world. They maybe didn't have every technology vendor that's out there. But what they did do is they would do a couple things for me. They would say, nope, this isn't a good fit. You're not going to have a good experience with that. I cherish that because our customers trust us, which means when I come to someone else and I'm asking them about their services, I want them to tell me, is this going to work? Is this the best fit? Tell me about your industry knowledge based on this. Have you had successes with it? Were there pitfalls? That is extremely important to me. So being able to go back and get that information was paramount. Then being able to tie that together with their ability to execute on the things that they said they could do, that's really where we found ourselves pushing 80%, 90% of our business to BCM because we finally found someone who could do what they said they could do. And it got to the point where it made sense for us to merge forces, and we became a little bit of a turbocharger for BCM and some of those efforts around SD-WAN. I think what I find the most interesting about this, Dan, is we find ourselves in a similar spot with voice now, where a lot of people are looking at the different UC platforms that are out there. They're maybe on a traditional SIP trunking, and we watch those kind of fade to the wayside as people look and invest in newer technologies. So being able to guide that again within a larger organization, again, punching up against these big global organizations, but with our flexibility and nimbleness, it's just one of my favorite things in the world.
Well, I love that you speak about it with passion. I think you don't give yourselves enough credit, though. I think you guys have tons of experience that goes back to years even before some of these other acquisitions in regards to the multi-site, now multinational enterprises. Can you tell us a little bit about, why it is that you guys serve that market segment so well?
Yeah, that's a good one. And it's kind of an unfair advantage. We don't have a lot of technical debt that the big carriers do. So they're living in physical based infrastructures. That's how they've designed their solutions for hundreds of years. It's facilities based infrastructures. We're an IP-based carrier. That gives us the ability to create multiple paths on things without having to physically connect them across. Because of that, we can use multiple carriers and there's no individual single point of failure. That just makes our solution a little bit cleaner and works better with the way that a lot of people are trying to conduct their business, whether that be remote, at a coffee shop, etc. You need that flexibility. You have to be able to pass packets. So I think there's a lot of it that comes from we're sort of the next generation of carrier. Our portals do update extremely quickly in comparison to a lot of those that carry the legacy technological debt. So being able to extract those and work in the business world now, not where it was 20, 30 years ago, I think has been a great advantage for us and our customers.
Let's add a little bit of context to all of the market positioning, the strengths, and the philosophy that we've talked about without naming any names, or if you can name a name, feel free, of course. Can you give an example of a point A to point C where BCM One was the point B that helped a client within your wheelhouse, your no reason to go anywhere else. This is perfect for us. How you solve the problem for them in a specific use case.
Yeah, that's an awesome one. I'll try not to get too excited about it because it is one of the key scenarios that shows that the power of pure IP combined with BCM. So we have a large educational customer based out of the Northeast, premier educational type facility. Like so many large enterprises, they've acquired people, they have different departments with different visions. They very seriously had 5 different unified communications platforms. They had on-prem, they had a little taste of WebEx, they had a touch of Zoom, and they really wanted to move to Teams. Each organizational unit had different needs. So some really wanted WebEx because maybe they were in marketing and they wanted to do their webinars. The knowledge workers really wanted Teams. They had a legacy call center that had to be on the prem. If you go to any carrier, trying to tie that together and create a strategy to get from where you are to where you're trying to go over a period of almost years, not months, is not something that a lot of people are good at. So being able to power that initial system, sit down with them and understand, okay, marketing wants to go WebEx. We can do that for you. But the rest of your users want to go Teams. We can do that too. All you want to do 10-digit or 5-digit dial, 4-digit dial between those disparate platforms. Not a problem because everything is owned by us. And at the end of the day, if we have those numbers, we become the traffic hub. Our infrastructure is nothing more than a bunch of really big SBCs going go left or go right. And when we have that control, we can bend it to our will to push that traffic as we see fit. And that's something not a lot of customers can do because they don't touch all of those different endpoints. One thing to remember about BCM is that we don't try and sell the platform for Microsoft Teams or for WebEx or for Zoom. We simply power them. And there's something powerful about being agnostic and just being the gas for the car in that scenario that lends a little bit of credibility when we talk about some of the things that we've seen in use case scenarios or experiences that have either worked out or that we might caution our customers against.
Yeah, I'm gonna put you in the corner again with the modesty. I think everything you said is awesome, and you mentioned a couple of things I want to touch on. First of all, one of them is about the experience. I think you have not bolted on, you have synergized, and I can attest to this because I was in the weeds with it. I joined during COVID. I took on a large account base concurrent with moving in with my girlfriend, now wife, with the week before COVID lockdowns and taking on a new role and a new technology, everything. So it did make it easy. And a lot of that was due to the training. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. And that's due to the experience and the way you guys are able to be flexible and agnostic in the solutions. But at the same time, you've been very focused on making acquisitions that are focused on the next gen solutions and managed services. But you have several different voice options to choose from. So you have the Next Vortex, you had the SIP US, SIP Trunk, you had Pure IP, and I think some others that I'm not even up to speed on. But
Yep.
I think that plays a large part to it. And if Jeff listens to this, kudos to him. And I think he's doing a great job keeping the focus. It makes sense. You see a lot of other providers that are making maybe AI acquisitions and trying to adapt. And sometimes that's great, sometimes it's not. But BCM One's identity has really maintained and been within the lane that it was designed to be from the McGraw days, I think, and the acquisitions of even Arena One in the early days and things like that. But that all being said, I know there's a lot of complexity that comes with that sort of business model with the multiple acquisitions. And I think that success that I had is greatly attributed to folks like you and, Dave Long and Andrew and, Dan Betts, who I think retired, as well as Bob Reisman, who is certainly retired in Florida. I cannot wait to get him on here and see if his watch still matches the shirts. I've talked to him a few times here and there, but the training sessions and Derek Dyke, who I was chatting with in Nashville at Polaris Partner Summit, but you guys put together structured, and of course, Mike Nowak, put together a structured training course that every time you made a change, you made sure to unify the departments and bring together all the solutions and make it make sense for everybody in the department, the salespeople. So my sort of question there is, how important has training, education, and knowledge and wisdom transfer been for you, and what role you play in that? How is it impacting BCM One today?
I think that's phenomenal. So a couple points there. One big one is, to your point on acquiring companies within your discipline. Jeff has done a great job of building us up to get to this point where we're finally ready for it. So we started off domestically. We understood the US markets. We got this under our belt with some really great acquisitions that had tons of experience. and then continued to grow that until we were ready to move over to that global side. And I think that's a huge piece of it. One of the other things that I can't stress enough, it's very easy to sell a portal, it's easy to sell a price, but selling on service and soft skills is probably one of the things that BCM One does best. For every bit of ounce of effort we put into our hard technical skills and the ability to understand everything, we work equally as hard on our soft skills. The partner community is complex. There are a lot of intricacies that come with it, and oftentimes those solutions are provided by multiple companies. Not everyone plays nice in that sandbox, but as long as we understand the parts and pieces of the puzzle that we're working on, we'll stay distinctly in that wheelhouse to make sure that we don't disrupt the overall design that our agents are working on. We'll, of course, lend our expertise where it makes sense and push things that we know we can execute on strongly. But again, going back to all the way back to the very beginning of our conversation, one of the things that I loved about BCM when I was a client of theirs that I've tried to emulate is our ability to say no and yes appropriately. We want to say yes as much as we can, but only where it's going to be a great fit. And then when we look at the training, I think you were part of the calls every week or every other week. We do product marketing calls to help understand what everyone's seeing across the market, not just our products, but what our competitors are doing, where we're strong, where we've got some room to improve. And I mean, if I could change my title, it would be to be a technology evangelist, because that's what we do with each and every one of our salespeople. You have to have a passion to be good at something. And we quickly suss that out within our ranks to understand, is this something that someone's doing for a paycheck, or are they doing it because they love it and they want to create a podcast to help others figure out how to do solutions? So I think that's an integral part of our company.
Yeah, I think it's an integral part of any successful person's DNA to be passionate about what you're doing. And that what you were saying kind of encompasses the aspect of just be passionate about what you're doing. And there's a couple things you mentioned in there. You said when to say no and when to say yes. From my perspective in working with you, was you have this sort of curiosity balanced with productivity. And the follow-up to that was very in line with the no and yes, which was, how do you, and this is coming from myself as now an entrepreneur who's managing 500 different things. I was just rocking my 3.5-month-old baby in the car seat 3 minutes before this call, trying to get him in there. I spent an entire day in an event, Polaris Ascend for IoT and advanced networking yesterday. I got home at like 9 o'clock, had to put him to sleep and do the whole thing. So I'm always exhausted. So it's about time management. And sorry for the rambling, but my question is to say, in any sort of aspirational role where you are tasked on your own accord with what is most important, when to say yes, when to say no, how do you know when you're doing enough or you're doing too much?
Yeah, that's a tough one, especially if you have any of the neurodivergent traits like ADHD. You can find yourself down rabbit holes quite easily. So how do you balance that? I think what you have to do is it probably depends. That's a good answer for any engineer, right? It depends on where you are in the phase of your business cycle. When you're first starting your agency, almost everything is critical, and you're probably going to say yes to some stuff that maybe you shouldn't. You'll learn those lessons along the way. I know I have my scars from them without a doubt. As you kind of mature a little bit along that growth pattern, trying to emulate what's been successful for you. Not to the point where you're selling buggy whips in 2020, because that wouldn't be successful now if the market leaves you behind, but at least enough to where you go, okay, every time I see this is a really good fit for BCM and my customers are happy, and it becomes a natural motion. You can't know everything about everything, and I think being humble is probably one of the best traits that you can have as a salesperson or an engineer. I myself, everyone pretends like I know a lot. I do, because I study the stuff and I enjoy it, but I don't know everything. I can't. And it takes a group or a team approach and that level of humbleness to be able to come in and say, I understand this and this. I know you're an expert on this other part. Let's put our heads together and come up with a perfect solution for our customers. When you approach it from that perspective of, I'm trying to solve something, I'm going to educate myself to accomplish a goal, I think that's how you prevent yourself from going down the rabbit hole, which is so easy to do, especially with as many interesting technologies as there are. I myself could spend weeks just on AI. But what productivity do I get from that? I have to really focus in on how does that help my customers in their UC journey? How does that power them forward? How can I get them thinking about creative things that they've never thought about? Using Copilot to record customer service conversations and then do a warm transfer over with all the notes included. Those are things that can change people's lives, that make a big difference to customers, to employee satisfaction, to customer service levels, that sometimes people just don't even know it's out there. And until you know it's out there, you can't use it. So those are the fun pieces of how you kind of balance that equation.
The reason why I asked that is I see a lot going on there. I think the channel is changing. I think nobody's going to deny that. There's a lot of different things that are happening. You know, some of the technologies that used to be the core and the anchors, which of course voice and data is always going to be a foundational piece of any company. Those are things you need to have rock solid, or else you're out of business. Any downtime, any poor quality, voice calls dropping, video calls being poor, it's going to make a huge, dent and impact in your business. But then you have the other side, which you mentioned, is people thinking about AI, thinking about more in cybersecurity with all the new risks that are coming out, in regards to how those two have a relationship. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because I, as an entrepreneur now, have been working a lot with the market feedback, where I have the technology advisory role. I'm also hosting the podcast, which is embedded into a newsletter that I'm launching. By happenstance, I happen to be working marketing clients alongside technology advisory clients. So now I have 2 marketing clients at this current time, and I'm working 2 opportunities simultaneously. So I'm very interested in how to balance that. So I think the wisdom there was really to focus on what people are looking for, and then sort of stay in the lane of what is going to provide the most value to your clients and your audience at the same time. So
yeah, we're not trying to recreate our business every time. We're just simply trying to find new use case scenarios that can help our customers. And I think that's really, that's where the magic comes in. Stay in the areas that you know.
Right. So what's going on next for BCM? What do you think is going to be the next topic that you guys are going to be driving in terms of leadership within the market?
Yeah, so I think that the continued conversation around AI isn't going anywhere. If you look at the marketing, if you open up any web page, you're going to see tons and tons of things around business enablement for AI. The interesting part that I see is where the promise from the reality on that. And I think we're finally starting to tune into the personas. So whether it's HR or sales or IT or customer service, which groups are really benefiting from AI in its current state, where it's going to be possibly a benefit in the future. And honestly, we're just not seeing it move the needle at all. And it's very interesting because those licenses cost money. If not planned properly, you could derail your company and say AI is not a good fit for us just by simply selecting the wrong pilot group. So working with Microsoft so closely, being part of their technology advisory committee, being part of their managed partner program, that keeps us very closely aligned with them. A couple months ago, I was out in Seattle. Last week, one of my peers was out in Seattle. We're constantly getting these briefings around Teams Premium, AI Copilot, Teams Rooms, the things that are around our world, but are enhancing and changing the way our customers work. So if I were to pull out my crystal ball, I'd say a lot more of that, especially, and continuing around WebEx. And then one last little piece that's popped up more often than not lately, and I think is a result of the market we find ourselves in. This goes back to a little bit of the technology debt conversation. Microsoft has an awesome ecosystem full of, I think it's like 4,000 independent software vendors, all adding little parts and pieces to their equation. Same thing with WebEx. You want call recording, you want an attendant console, you want all these different things. Just insert the puzzle piece. And then you've got someone who's a little bit different, Zoom, who's got a lot of those kind of just integrated and put in there. And we're seeing within our customers the desire for that ease of just want something that works. And if it's all in one seat and and I fall in that 80% of the easy to service, I just need call recording, I just need an attendant console, I just need to make calls. we're seeing a good pickup on Zoom for that as well, just because of its ease of use in the interface. So just very interesting trends in the crystal ball.
You were talking about how, yes, AI is a big topic of interest and can have great potential to change business processes and make a real dent. But just because AI is a new thing and just because it sounds so interesting doesn't mean it's the right thing for you. And certainly not at this particular period in time. On our previous guest, we had Jeff Slapp at Steel Dome, and he put an emphasis on how important it is to actually be positioned properly from a security and implementation standpoint in regards to having your data classified, labeled, organized, compliant to even be prepared enough to execute that. So whereas resources are being diverted in company organizations thinking about AI and talking about AI, they may have the cart way before the horse and not even be ready to do that. So while they're ignoring neglecting, I'll say, some of the fundamentals like voice and data and not emphasizing that and getting that rock solid, they're sort of distracted in a sense and potentially wasting resources and putting energy into things that may not turn out so fruitful.
Yeah, and it's so funny to look at like the reality of this stuff, because if everyone designed their Active Directory or intro exactly the way that Microsoft says, and we applied security permissions perfectly, we all could have just walked in and turned on Copilot. The reality is that's not how humans work. That's not how businesses work. And we're typically a little bit more chaotic than that. To your last guest's point, a lot of the ways that people found out their security was messed up was by turning on Copilot and going, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have access to this. It reset that bar and went, oh my, okay, we have to take a step back and shore up our roads. We've got to pave these things before we drive on them. It seems to be a common theme around almost all technologies that you have to get that basic blocking and tackling before you can get the whiz bang features. Same thing applies for AI. So going back and cleaning up a lot of that has now become our customers' priorities to then get to where they want to go. And I see the same parallels, whether it's AI, voice, data, or any technology shift.
You mentioned security and that being an important aspect of it. And I know you guys have a formidable SD-WAN offering, which is lesser known than I think it should be. Can you talk about the SD-WAN offerings that you have and how that plays into perhaps, or doesn't, more hot topics like maybe SASE or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. So again, this comes down to having conversations with our customers and understanding what they're doing. So if they're interested in taking a look at different ways to connect, different ways to work, SD-WAN, SASE, as well as increasing their security posture and reducing that attack surface area, those may be interesting topics to them. I think a lot of the times they naturally fall into the conversation just because even if we're solving for only voice, we still have to be able to pass those packets, right? We still have to get them from point A to point B. So that causes us to have those conversations around that basic blocking and tackling. Okay, what are we using for our underlay? How are we getting our voice there? Is it resilient? Is it through multiple carriers? Do we have redundancies? Do we have all the way down to kind of the mundane physical stuff? Are we going into diverse entrances within the physical building itself? They seem like details that you may not need to collect all the time, but they can be critically important depending on what you're solving for. If voice has lives tied to it, if it's your cash register, if it's the most important thing, you want to put on your belt and add the suspenders. It only makes sense. There may be other scenarios where you want to do belt suspenders and something else, because I've got customers who have primary path for their voice, a secondary path for their voice, a tertiary, and whatever a fourth path is too, Dan. I don't even know that one. So multiple ways off the island using disparate technologies. One may be a private connection, one may be SD-WAN, one may be straight over the top internet with just encryption applied. Tons of different ways to do it. Knowing the basics of how in what you can connect to gives you infinite freedom in designing for the customer. There are some times where you just simply need to know the technologies to understand how you can get from point A to point B. And we end up educating our customers a lot on that. Sometimes it could be stuff like low Earth orbit satellites, such as Starlink in those hard to reach areas, or a basic MPLX connection we've had since the 90s.
Yeah, because it should be it should be expected having the conversations with your clients and the process by which you go through discovery. What is the depth of the discovery process through engineering and implementation through BCM One? Because I think that's an area where you really shine at that maybe a lot of others do not.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome one. And I will have to send you a check for that. So we've been working
This
with
is
some of
not
our.
paid for. This is a great time to reiterate. This is not a pay to play. This is not a paid podcast. I have very, very intentional efforts for everybody I bring on the podcast. And this is, keep going.
I appreciate the question. The interesting thing is we've got some customers that we've been working with for decades, and that's the truth of it. That speaks to our discovery process and aligning ourselves to what our customers' priorities are. When you look at an organization that's a global organization, there are probably 15 to 20 things that BCM can help with right off the bat. Understanding what the priority is for our customers, that's paramount. What we'll do is we'll focus in on that first piece. We'll execute, we'll design, we'll plan, and we'll execute that to the level that the customer is completely satisfied, and we've earned the right to start talking about some other things. When we do that discovery process, we are solely focused on what that customer priority is, but with a mindfulness towards some of the other projects and things that we might have. We don't want to accidentally select a technology at the very beginning that pigeonholes us into a solution that we may not want long term. One of the coolest things about BCM is, like you'd mentioned, the multiple platforms. You have to really understand each one of those and the caveats that go with them to make sure that we land these in the right spots and don't have unnecessary migrations, etc. It gives our customers room for infinite growth. So if I'm talking to a director of IT for a company who's trying to figure this out, our discovery process starts with understanding what your priorities are and working on exactly what you're asking for us to, with a mindfulness towards the holistic architecture that you're trying to implement. So understand the overarching changes as well as those point-specific solutions to drive ROI and get the projects to the next phases.
Awesome. Well, I think we've covered a lot here today. I know we're coming up on length. I want to dial it back a little bit from the business conversation and give you the floor with an open-ended microphone to talk about anything that you might feel is important for folks in we'll say a community mentorship aspect. What do you think is the most important in order for folks that may be aspiring to a role or function that you have been in or are in, or otherwise advice just for the community?
Yeah, be curious. That's the number one. Don't go down those rabbit holes like we kind of talked about earlier, but be curious. I think, I look back at my career and I started off with networking. I went into security and I just kept finding things that were very interesting. I would volunteer with my groups. I wasn't part of the security group at the time. I had no credentials. This was a large financial organization. Almost everyone there was super kind to me, helped take me under their wing and say, here are the specific resources to get you up to speed for that junior security role that you're striving for. I think the biggest thing that I can say is we're all humans. We're all trying to improve. Find someone who has humility, who has that humbleness, who wants to work with you, who's willing to help sit down and spend a little bit of time. I think most people are, as long as they see that you're willing to invest equally in the effort.
Yeah, I think that was like a Steve Jobs quote. I think he said, I've never encountered someone who wasn't willing to help when I asked them, something along
We
those
all
lines.
have anxiety and all these fears, or we look up at these technical juggernauts and we go, oh, I can't bug them with this question. They're going to think I'm silly. We love that stuff because that shows that you're trying to learn something that we think is cool. We'll always help with that, especially if you put the same level of effort in.
Well, this is one of the core reasons why I started this podcast, because while it is a significant resource allocation for me with, again, no financial reward involved here, I think it is super important that what I have found most beneficial in my career development, personal development, is put onto a public stage, and the people that have impacted that, have an opportunity to come on and sort of distribute their perspective, because the conversations held behind closed doors that are not prefaced, or we'll say directly accessed through, marketing, as marketing, of course, has its place, but you can't see people behind marketing. No matter how well your marketing is, and Paula is a genius, and I love Paula, but you can't see Michael Hawkins' story behind a post about Pure IP, of course. So this is why I do what I do here, and I'm very glad that I had you on. The last thing I'll ask is, aside obviously for the potential of someone contacting myself through my own channels to talk about BCM One services, how can they engage with you directly? Make it easy for them to get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a channel email box that we can post as far as some of the notes on this. And they can obviously go to the BCM One or Pure IP website, fill out the little referral form, or contact me directly, mhawkins@BCM One. Happy to answer any questions. Don't necessarily have to be partner or sales related.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Mike. Really appreciated having you on.
Thanks so much. This was fun. I appreciate it.